Hello guys, welcome back to Mr. Deep Coding channel. I hope you guys are doing amazing. This is part 11 of the KMM social media app series, and today I am inside IntelliJ. That means we're going to work on the backend. So grab your backend project, open it inside IntelliJ, and let's get started. Right guys, now the first thing we're going to do is to refactor a little bit our project, because last time we were just writing code to make sure that we could have something that is working, but now we are going to refactor it a little bit to have something more organized, and then we'll proceed with implementing the follow feature. First of all, let's expand the model package and then open user.kt file. So inside this user.kt file, we have an object named userRow and then a data class named user. Now let's rename this user data class as a userRow, because that matches a little bit with what it's going to do, since this is the result returned by our database. Returned from the user table inside our database. Right, and now there is a conflict because this one also is named userRow. We're going to rename that as user table, because this is the table definition for our users table in the database. Alright, so the next thing I want you to do is also to rename this avatar attribute here, or the avatar column. We're going to name it as image URL. So here as well, we're going to name it as user, or let's just name it as image URL, like so. So we can rename this data class also property as image URL. Alright, so next we're going to add some extra attribute that we have for our user, and that is the follower and the following count. Okay, so now here also inside the user row, we need to add those two attributes. Okay, so now next thing is to move this user.kt inside the DAO and user package contained in this DAO package. And the reason is that this user.kt file has something that is related to the database. You can, if you wish, you can also rename this user.kt. So I prefer to rename it to user table. That way we know what is contained inside this file. So I'm going to refactor. Okay, great. And now let's close the user table.kt and close the DAO package as well. Alright, so the next thing is to open the repository package. Now we named this as user repository, but actually what is being done inside this interface is that we're going to sign up and sign in the user. It's about the feature that is being implemented, and we're going to name the files accordingly. So instead of having this user repository, we're going to rename that to auth repository. That makes more sense. Alright, so we will rename the package as well. So instead of user, we are going to rename this as auth, like so. Now you can close these two. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to refactor is the way that we generate the IDs. For example, for our users table, we are just using auto-incremented integer IDs. That means user 1 will have ID 1 and etc. for the number of users that your database will have. So we will use this library Snowflake ID. This is, as it says, generate Twitter-like Snowflake IDs in Java. So all you need to do is, where is that? You can copy this Gradle dependency implementation, then back inside IntelliJ, we're going to open build.gradle.kts file. Then right below here, we can paste that implementation, of course. Okay, so the next thing is to load Gradle changes. Okay guys, now since we have modified quite a lot of stuff, let's run the project and make sure that we didn't break anything, and if there's any error, we're going to fix that. There we go, we are having some issues. Okay, so let's quickly fix that. So this is not user row anymore. Alright, so let's rerun the app again. We still had some errors. Yeah, of course, we need to fix them as well. So the return type here is user row. Alright, so let's rerun the app again and check. So the app is running, so our refactor was successful. We can close everything now. So after adding the Snowflake ID library, I'm going to create a file inside this util package that will be responsible for returning an ID whenever we need one. So let's create a Kotlin file, and I will call this ID generator. So I'm going to paste code here to not waste time, and I will explain you what it does. Alright, so what we have here is we first of all have this generator ID, which is a value that the Snowflake ID generator will use to generate a unique ID for our application. So I've created this environment variable. You already know how to create or how to add environment variable. So you'll need to go up here and edit configuration. Then from here, you can click and add new environment variable. You need to give it a name and also a value. So for this ID generator, in my case, I just give it 10. You can give whatever value you need, and that will help the library to generate unique IDs for your application. Okay, so whenever we need an ID, we will just call this generate ID method from this ID generator. So now we can close this, and now open the DAO package and expand this user package. Also open the user table, and we're going to change the ID. It's not an integer anymore, it should be a long, and we can change this return type as well. Okay, and now I'm going to drop the users table so that a new table will be created. Alright, so for now we can rerun the application and see if the users table is generated with this new attribute and also the information that we have changed inside this user table. So around the application. Alright, so we need also to fix this error. So for the auth response data, the ID is not an integer anymore, it's a long. And let's see what else we've got here. No, there's no error anymore, so we can rerun the application and see. Alright, so the app is running and we've got our server responding. So let's quickly verify that the new table were created. Okay, so as you can see, we have now following and followers count, and that means our table were successfully created with this new data and also the modified attribute. Alright, so now we're done with the refactoring. Now one more thing to do is to generate a user ID whenever we create a new user. So open UserDao implementation, and in here we need to set the ID. Now we can close the UserDao implementation and we're going to start implementing the follow feature. Alright, so first thing first, we need to define a table, and for that open the DAO package and let's create one package called follows package. Then inside this follows package we're going to create a new Kotlin file, and this will be named follows table. Now inside this follows table we need a Kotlin object. It's going to extend table from exposed library, and we're going to give our table a name that will be follows. Okay, so this follows table we have three attributes. The first one is named follower ID. So this is the ID of the person that is following. The second attribute will be following ID. This is the ID of the person that is being followed. And lastly, we need to catch the date, and for that we'll need a followed date. So in here we're going to use a date time that we don't have yet. So to use the date time from exposed library, we need to add one more dependency. So you need to add this dependency expose a Java time in order for us to use the date time. You can sync your Gradle project. Once that is done, we're going back, and from here we can use a date time, and the name will be follow date. We're going to pass a default expression, and for that we're going to use current date time. Okay, so now after defining this follows table, we need to open database factory, and we are going to add that here. You can close database factory as well as this follows table.kt. Alright, now next we need a DAO, a data access object. And for that, come inside a follows package, and we're going to create an interface called FollowDAO. Select interface. So here we first of all have a method to follow a user. So we call this follow user, and this method takes in two parameters. First of all, the follower and the following ID. This returns a boolean to notify the caller if the follow action was successful or not. The second method is to unfollow a user. We're going to take the follower as well as the following, and it returns a boolean as well. The third method is to get the list of followers ID. So we're going to call this get followers. So we need the user ID for which we are going to query the followers. Since we're going to do pagination, we need a page number, and this is going to be an integer. We also take the page size, and the return type will be a list of long, since we're going to return the list of IDs. So what will happen is that when this method returns this list of IDs, then we're going to fetch the user information from the user's table. So we are going to get following as well. We have one last method, and that is to check if a user is already following the user that they want to follow. Alright, and now we have the FollowDAO interface. Let's quickly create an implementation for that. Select all the method and click OK. Let's first start implementing the FollowUser method. So call dbQuery. You need to import this dbQuery. We need an insert statement. So the follower ID will be follower. Now we need to call this insert statement resulted value, get single or null, and we need to check that this return value is different of null. If it's the case, then a user has been successfully inserted inside this follows table. So that's all for this follow user. Okay, now to unfollow a user, again, let's call first a dbQuery. So follows table.delete where we will delete where the follower ID so we're going to delete where the follower ID equal follower and the following ID equal following. If that is greater than 0, it means that the record has been removed from the follows table. So let's complete the implementation with the remaining method. To get the followers, let's first call dbQuery. So here we need to call follows table.select. We need to select where followers table.follower ID is equal to user ID. Then we need to order by follow date descending. Now you can call a limit and pass here the page size and the offset. So for the offset, we're going to make page number -1 times page size, and we need to convert this to long. Lastly, we need to map the result to return only follow table.following ID. So what happens here? We first of all select where the follower ID equals this user ID. So every record where the follower ID corresponds to this user ID, we need to select that. Then we order, okay, by follow date. We set the limit to be the page size for the maximum number of record we need to return, and then the offset. So after getting all those follows record, we need to map that to only get the following IDs. Now to get the following, we're going to do pretty much the same thing. So instead of selecting where the follower ID equal the user ID, we're going to select where the following ID equals this user ID. Then what we're going to map is the follower ID instead of the following ID. Now we're going to implement this is already following method. So for that, we first of all need a query result. And we're going to query from our follows table. Select. So we will select where follows table.follower ID equals this follower and follows table.following ID equals following. Then we take the query result and we convert that to list, and we need to check if that is not empty. Alright, so we are done with this FollowDAO implementation. Next, we need a repository. The repository in this case will manage the FollowsDAO and the UserDao, because when we follow a new user, not only are we going to add a new record to the follows table, but we would like to increment the followers count in the users table for the user that is following, and the following count for the user that is being followed. So to be able to do that, we first of all need to add one more method to the UserDao. So for that, let's open the user package, then open UserDao. First, let's open the UserDao interface. Here we're going to add one method, and that is updateFollowsCount. This will take a follower following ID and also a boolean that we're going to call isFollowing. Now if this boolean is true, that means the action is to follow the user, and it will also return a boolean. Great. Now we need to implement this updateFollowsCount inside UserDao implementation. So right above the row to user, you can call update, and this should autocomplete updateFollowsCount. Great. Now here we need to call dbQuery as usual. First of all, let's define a variable that we call count. So if we are following, then we're going to add 1, else the count will be -1. Alright, so for the follower record, we're going to define one variable that we call success1, and here we need to call userTable.update. We are going to update where userTable.id is equal to follower. So since we're going to update a single column, we need to call it.update, and the column that we need to update is the following count, and the new value will be following count. Call the plus function and pass in count. So we will do the same for the following record. So we need to select where the user ID equals to following, and the column that we need to update is the followers count. And so here we can return success1 and success2. Oh, we haven't renamed this one. Great. Now we have our updateFollowsCount. Alright, so now we are going to create the follows repository, and for that expand repository package, and inside the repository package let's create one more package, and that is the follows package. Now inside this follows package, let's create the follows repository interface. Alright, so this interface will have two methods. First, it's suspend fun follow user. Now this takes in follower and following IDs, and it will return a response. So select the response class that we created in the util package. So it will be a follow and unfollow response. Don't worry, we're going to define this in a moment. Secondly, we have the unfollow user. Alright, and now let's quickly define this follow and unfollow response. So for that, expand the model package. So let's create follows Kotlin file in which we're going to define all the models related to the follow and unfollow. Alright, so here let's have a data class follow and unfollow response. First we'll have a success boolean. We also have a message. So in case something went wrong, we would like to respond with a message to tell the user what happens. That's why we have this message attribute. Close the follows.kt and let's import follow and unfollow response now. Alright, so now let's add the implementation. Okay, so here the follows repository will take UserDao and also the FollowsDAO. Oh, not UserDao, FollowsDAO, like so. Okay, now let's implement the follow user method first. So here we need to first of all check if this user is already following the user that they want to follow, FollowDAO, and check if this user is already following the user they want to follow. So in that case, we need to respond with an error and telling the user that they are already following this user. So take the error response. Okay, so the code will be http status code.forbidden. So now the data will be follow and unfollow response. So here success will be false and the message will be you are already following this user. Okay, so here we are returning from the if else. So here we're going to declare a variable success and call FollowDAO dot follow user. We're going to pass in follower and following. So that's going to return us a boolean, and now we need to check if that was successful. And in case it was successful, we need to call UserDao.updateFollowsCount. So in here we need to pass follower and following, and for the boolean is following, we're going to pass that to true. Then the response will be a success response. We're just going to pass the data since the code is http status code.ok. So for the data, we'll call follow and unfollow response and pass success as true. So in case we couldn't follow the user, so we're going to have that else, we need to return an error. Now this time we're going to tell the user that the errors occurred on our side and we couldn't update the record in our database. Okay, so here the error of the error code will be internal server error. Follow and unfollow response. Success is false. And for the message, we'll say, alright, so that's it for following a user. Now to unfollow a user. Okay, so here we need to have success as well, and we're going to call FollowDAO.unfollow user and pass in follower and following. Then we're going to return if the unfollow action was successful. In that case, we're going to call success response. Pass the data as follow and unfollow. Success is equal to true. Else, we're going to return an error. For the code, we'll pass internal server error as well, and the message will be the same. So let me just copy this. Alright, so I think that's all we need for the repository. Now the next step is to create the route and make use of the repository to complete this feature. Alright, so for that, let's go in route package. So from here, we're going to create follows route. So create a new Kotlin file and let's name it follows route. Select file and hit enter. Okay, now let's create an extension function to the routing class from io.ktor.server. We're going to call this follows routing. Now first thing, we need to get the repository. So repository by inject follows repository. Alright, so next we need to call authenticate. So we're going to call this authenticate to make sure that the user that is trying to access these resources is an authenticated user. Now we need to call route. For the path, we're going to pass in a string. Okay, so this is going to be a post method, and inside this post block we need to first of all take parameters that were passed. So let's call these params, and we have call.receive nullable, and here we are going to pass follows params. So we don't have this follows param yet. Now let's go inside model package and follows.kt. So here we need a data class. Let's call this follows params. Alright, so for the follows params, we need to have a follower, which will be a long that represent the ID of the person that is following. We also have the following, the person that is being followed, as well as is following boolean that tells us the action. So if this is following is false, that means we are unfollowing this user. Alright, so now come back and let's quickly import this follows params. Now we need to check if params equals null. That means we couldn't deserialize the data, or we couldn't convert the parameter that were submitted by the user to create this follows params object. Okay, so for this case we need to call.respond. So the status will be bad request, and for the message we are going to return follow and unfollow response. Alright, so success will be equal to false, and the message that we need to tell the user is that they submitted wrong parameters. Or we can just pass this oops, something went wrong. So here we need to return from post. Now if we could successfully convert the user parameters to this follows param object, we will reach this point, and from here we need to create a val result. And for that we're going to first of all check if. Now if param is following, that means the action is to follow the user. So in that case we're going to call, so let's call repository.followUser. Okay, so for the follower we'll pass params.follower, and for the following we'll pass params.following. So else we're going to call repository.unfollowUser, and for the follower the same, pass follower, following going to pass following. And from here we're going now to call.respond. So at the status will be result and .code, and the message will be result and .data. Okay, so I think we are done with followsRoute.kt. Now let's call this inside plugin open routing.kt and let's call follows routing. Alright, so now before we test our app, let's quickly provide the repository and also the FollowDAO. Okay, so for that, let's open the DI package and open appmodule.kt. So from here, we're going to provide a repository and also the FollowDAO. Okay, so we can close. Now we can run the app and see if we have an error. If we don't, then I'm going to open Postman and we're going to test this follows feature. The app is running, so I'm going to quickly open Postman and let's test this feature and see if everything is working normally. Okay guys, now I've got the Postman opened, but one thing that you need to do if you haven't already, you need to wipe all your data inside the database. We can come here inside Postman. Now I have already these 3 requests. On one hand is this sign up request. I have this follows request and also a login request. So I'm going to create 2 users and try the follow and unfollow feature. I have a name Samuel and samuel@gmail.com and also a password as Samuel password. So we will send that. Okay, so here we have a new user created. Alright, so let's copy this ID. So come here and we can paste that for the follower. Let's create another user quickly. Alright, so I have this John user with john@gmail.com and also John password. So let's try to create a second user. Okay, now we have this John user which has this ID. Going to copy that and we will paste here. Okay, and now before we send this, let's try to log in with a user, for example Samuel, and you can see that Samuel has 0 follower and 0 following. Let's follow John. Alright, so we are having a bad request. So we've got an error here. Serializer for class is not found. Oh yeah, we forgot to add we need to add this @serializable, and I think the same is needed for follow and unfollow. So just add this serializable. So let's rerun the app. Okay, now let's go back inside Postman and send the result. Alright, so now we are getting this success true and the message is null, of course, because that was successful. Now come to login request. So here if we hit send again, so we are having an issue. So follower and following were not updated. Let's quickly see what we missed. Okay guys, now the error is that, it's not an error, we just forgot to update this auto response data inside auto repository implementation. So when a user signs in, like when they log in, we didn't pass the follower and the following count. We just left it as it was when we implemented this sign in method for the authentication feature. Now here we need to pass the follower and the following count from the database. So from here we can quickly call following count, and for the following count we're going to call user.following count. The same followers count we will call user.followsCount. That's what we need to do. Let's rerun the app and see. Okay, and now let's follow the user again. Sam tried to log in. So one thing that you can see here is that the following count is set to 2 now, because I think we did one more mistake here, and that is we forgot to update the follows count when we unfollowed a user. So we need to open FollowRepository implementation, and I think when we unfollowed the user and when it was success, we forgot to update, to call UserDao.updateFollowsCount. And that's why you see that the count doesn't decrement when we unfollow a user. Okay, so you can rerun the app, and now let's check and see. So if we set this to false, even though we are having this 2, normally it should decrement to 1. So let's try to unfollow. Oops, something went wrong. So okay, let me just drop everything so we can restart. Okay, so there's nothing inside, so let's recreate these users. Now we have an error because we dropped the table and we didn't rerun the app. So let's run that again. Now come back and let's send a new request. There we go. We have this user with this ID. So we're going to replace John's ID here. So let's create Samuel quickly. Or let's create Patrick this time. Okay, so let's create a second user. Patrick is there, and let's copy his ID and we'll paste here. So Patrick is following John. Alright, so the is following is true. Now come to login request. So here we need to pass Patrick. So let's say that Patrick is logging to his account. So for now, it should say following and followers are 0. Now, if we follow John, so this is Patrick's ID and this is John's ID. So if we hit send, we've got success. So if Patrick is logging to his account again, he should have this following count increased to 1. Now if John tries to log into his account, now you can see that John has these followers equals to 1. So if Patrick unfollowed John, so his following is false. Okay, we've got another success true. So here if John logs in again. Alright, so why is this 2? Okay. Oh god. I mean, we should pass false here. Sorry for that. Let's rerun the app again. Okay, let's just unfollow and make sure that this decrement to 1. Oh, that's, we unfollowed him already. Let's follow and unfollow him again. So if we follow, this should be 3 now. Now the reason we just got an error here is that there was no such record to remove in the database. That's why we've got that internal server error. So here when we follow again, this should count now to 3, and if we unfollow now, that should decrement, hopefully. Okay, so let's check that. Okay, now we're having 2. Alright guys, now we're going to stop the video here for today. I will see you in the next video, and until then, take care.